Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. This one is a lot different and it's a lot longer, as you can tell. Today I had an incredible opportunity to interview future Olympian Jake Riley. Jake Riley ran 2:10:02 at the 2020 US Olympic Marathon Trials and got second place behind Galen Rupp. I do a deep dive into Jake's career as a high school, college, and professional runner, how he had to battle his way back, and how he actually ended up getting on the starting line in Atlanta. This is part one of a two-part video. Part two will be coming soon. I didn't want to make the video super long. Without further ado, here's the interview. Go easy on me, this is my first time interviewing someone like this and having a Zoom meeting with a complete stranger. I stumble around occasionally and I forget that I need to look at the camera and not at the computer screen down here. But yeah, I'll see you at the end of the video for the inquiry of the episode and to sign off. All right, then let's get started. So Jake, thank you for coming onto the channel today. Since a number of the subscribers that watch my channel are high schoolers, I thought it would be interesting if we could start from the beginning of your high school journey and running career. So at what age did you first start running and take training seriously, and what were your first impressions of the sport itself?
Yeah, those are two very different questions, right? Because I did run my first cross country race in third grade. So I lived for 4 years in Dunedin in New Zealand, and so there was a city cross country meet, and you had to run a school race to qualify. And so I think for the 2 weeks before, we would do 20-minute runs for PE, and then you go out and race it. And I remember the first cross country race I ever did, we ran it barefoot around the school grounds. And so I remember going to the city race and being really mad that I wasn't allowed to run barefoot. But I ended up winning that first city race. I was always a soccer player, but I didn't really have any perspective about kind of what running was. And that's kind of how it progressed. Middle school, we moved back to the States and I started doing track. And so, middle school track, it's basically you go out and you run 3 laps of the field and then you go fart around with your friends for 20 minutes. But kind of my first experience with interval training, or you do 200s, you go do a hill repeats, and then, once the season's over, you're done. But then finally got to high school, and I was really fortunate that there was a group of 5 sophomores ahead of me that were all really into running. They liked to run and they liked to train, which I think is pretty unique unless you're part of a team that kind of has that culture. And ours didn't, but they just happened to be really into it. And they kind of just allowed me to tag along, which is pretty nice of them because I don't know, I could be an annoying freshman, the type. So yeah, they introduced me to training in the off season, going for runs on Saturday and Sunday when the coach isn't making you. So yeah, freshman year of high school is kind of the introduction to what it means to really train for racing. I was fortunate. I was pretty successful pretty early on. I think that's the reason that I liked running. Was I'm a very competitive person, and running is one of the things I could win at, because I'm also, especially when I was younger, I was a late bloomer. I was very small. So I wasn't going to be winning anything in basketball or football or any of the regular sports. I have, like most distance runners, I have no explosiveness. I can't really jump high. I have no flexibility. I can just go for a really long time. And so track was kind of, that's where I could make my money. I could win and kind of have that success. Yeah, freshman year, I did make varsity, didn't get to run at state, but had that first taste of success, came back in track, did solid, and then just every year after that kept progressing and kept getting more and more invested. After sophomore year, I finally quit soccer, so I became this track and cross country are going to be my sole focus, training year round type of thing, because at that point I was starting to get kind of the first letters from colleges and sort of that type of thing. And yeah, after that, it was just all running all the time.
Yeah, so your junior year of high school, your team won state, and then your senior year, you won state as an individual. How was, which experience was more memorable? The individual title, where you ran 15:51, or the team title?
Team title for sure. Because that was when I was just starting to kind of turn the corner and get good. So I was third at state that year, and our team was just we were just really really solid. So I think there was one guy that was a sophomore, I was a junior, and then everybody else was seniors. So it was this block of guys that I trained with for a long time. They were kind of my mentors, and they were all there, and we just absolutely crushed it. So the way the Washington classification system works, we were in the second biggest division. We beat North Central, who went on to win the national title like 2 years later. So I think we were like one of the last teams to beat North Central. That was very exciting. Got to stand on the podium with all the friends. And then the next year, my senior year, we went down in classification. So it was supposed to be less competitive, but our main rival, Burlington Edison, came down with us. And this was a team, they were from like just south of us, and we would race them like, I think, well, we'd see them like twice at dual meets during the year, and then you'd see them at league, district, and then at state. So we knew them really well. We didn't like them at all, and they freaking beat us at state. And so it was one of those things where I crossed the line and I had won, and I had a really good race that year. So there was a guy that I would go back and forth with, Chris Kwiatkowski, really, really good runner. He ended up going to University of Oregon, and he had my number in track for the longest time. He'd had my number in cross country too, but I beat him at district and I beat him at state. And I don't know if he's ever going to see this. So I crushed him at state. I think I won by like 45 seconds or something like that, which is very, very satisfying for me. But I knew it was going to be a close race against Burlington Edison. And so like it was one of those things where I crossed the line, celebrated for a second, and then I was immediately looking backwards. Where are we coming in? Where's Burlington? Trying to count the runners, trying to figure out where it was. And I think we only lost by like a couple points, which,
Oh,
you know,
wow.
I was very excited to win, but I really, really wanted that second team title, and especially to lose it to freaking Burlington. It still makes me mad.
Yeah,
It's still annoying, and I'm kind of friends with those guys at this point, but that one hurts a little bit still.
that kind of reminds me. So last season, my team was in the state qualifying meet, and we missed qualifying for state by 1 point. And we would have beat the other team on tiebreaker, but we missed them by 1 point. So I would imagine with your high school success that you received a lot of interest from colleges. And how was the recruitment process for you?
Yeah. So I had solid grades, and then I did really well in the PSAT, and I was competitive in cross country. I was third at state as a junior, but my track times they were good, but for sort of national recruiting, they weren't that great. I think as a junior, I was 9:20 and like 4:30, which is solid. It's going to get you D1 interest, but it's not going to be the top. So mostly what I had interested in me was like lots of Ivy League schools, University of Washington, and kind of sort of those what do you call them, Division 1A type of schools like Montana and
Yeah, mid-major.
interestingly, I did have Oklahoma State because that was right before they broke through, and so they were still trying to like get those guys that they thought could make a jump. Turned out if I'd gone there, I would have won 2 national cross country titles. But at the time, they still hadn't been super competitive. But it was kind of those solid Division 1 teams, but nothing great. The thing that really flipped it was that I went to Foot Locker cross country regionals and made Foot Locker nationals as a junior or as a senior, and then all of a sudden, I think it was like 10 minutes after the race, University of Oregon was talking to my dad, Stanford was talking to my dad. As soon as you make one of those national level meets, all of a sudden opportunities just explode. So I loved the recruiting process. It took all 5 of my visits. I tried to get like a nice little blend in there. So I went to Oklahoma State, Columbia, University of Washington, University of Oregon, and Stanford. And I liked all of those schools. I had a great time on all my visits. I could have seen myself at all of them. I was pretty taken with University of Washington. It's my home state. The coaches were really enthusiastic. They were one of the first people that started talking to me. And it was actually to the point where I was getting a little bit tired of the process. I hadn't taken my visit to Stanford yet, but I was at an indoor meet at UW. I was like, man, it's so cool here in the Dempsey. UW is such a cool school. So I called the assistant coach at Stanford to say I wasn't going to take my visit. I was like, I'm done. I'm going to commit to University of Washington, but I wasn't able to get through to him. And I decided not to leave a message. And then I thought better of it the next day, ended up taking my visit to Stanford in the spring and just absolutely loved it. Had a great time on my visit. I don't know if, Stanford is essentially the perfect school in my opinion. So yeah, the best possible outcome. And I'm really, really glad, path's not taken. Really, really glad that I didn't end up getting through to the assistant coach at that time.
Yeah, and speaking of the PSAT, I take the PSAT tomorrow morning.
Hey, good luck.
Thanks. So what was the transition from high school to Stanford like in terms of running and training?
Honestly, it was pretty, I was really fortunate. It was pretty easy. I had a really solid group of guys around me. Our recruiting class there were 5 of us. And we had just a really supportive, just good group of upperclassmen that all kind of showed us the ropes without being, so I think sometimes you can have upperclassmen that are all about putting the freshmen in their place, and you can have upperclassmen that can't put freshmen in their place. They were capable of it. They could certainly make the workouts hard, but they were also interested in making sure that we were successful. And I redshirted my cross country season of eligibility. So, I had a little bit of time to adjust. We were also, the coach when I first got there was Peter Teagan, who the women's national cross country coach of the year award is named after him. So he's a very successful coach. He was at Wisconsin, but his training was pretty low mileage. It was we were hitting maybe 60 miles a week. We did not run on Sundays. So we barely had a long run. Workouts, it'd be 800 meters, moderate tempo, 800 meters. So pretty low volume, low intensity type of stuff. So it was pretty easy to adjust to that type of thing. So yeah, I didn't really have any issues. I think even balancing the school workload with training, because we were on such a lackadaisical schedule, it wasn't too bad. And I was, really, that was something I was worried about. So I was 3 classes a semester type of thing, just to make sure that I wasn't going to be overwhelmed. So yeah, I had a great time with the transition. I don't know that everybody can count on that kind of experience, but yeah, I loved it from day one.
Yeah, I like hearing the stories about people transitioning to college from high school. My brother runs at a D3 school, and so it's been interesting to hear what he has to say about the training compared to high school. So
Yeah, it's
you,
certainly more competitive, right? Because you come
yeah,
from being kind of one of the top guys on your team to all of a sudden having to be the bottom dog again. And so I think some people can have trouble kind of getting back into the line and just getting on the train and letting other people take the lead. But that was one of the things from my high school experience, where I had spent so much time just kind of following that group ahead of me, and just, I'm going to do what they do. They're really good, and if I do what they do, I will be good. I just kind of took that mentality into college, and I think that's what's going to serve you the best. It's the upperclassmen they're there for a reason. They know what they're doing.
hmm
Get in line, and you can be faster than them at some point, but there are still things that you can learn, and just kind of follow their example. So.
And it's you could be really good in high school, but once you go into college, you are going to be, it's like a whole nother level.
Yeah. Well, so the next year, my sophomore year, we had Chris Derrick come in, and he came in with a faster 5K PR than anybody on the team. So he was very, very good. And from day one, it was pretty clear that he was going to be our number 1 runner on cross country. But that doesn't necessarily mean that just because you can beat us in workouts, or that you can kind of run the table, that upperclassmen aren't still kind of worth listening to, or being a part of the team and kind of getting on the train isn't a worthwhile experience. So, I think Chris had a pretty good adjustment period too, because he's a very team oriented guy, and is all about making sure that workouts kind of go well, and you can do your own thing and be successful, but relying on the team and making sure you integrate with them, I think, is the biggest key to making that adjustment, right? having those teammates and learning from their experiences instead of having to learn it again is huge.
So in college, you were an 8-time NCAA All-American. And what, in your opinion, what was your biggest accomplishment in college?
I think it was junior year. I don't know, because of the red shirts, it gets all mixed up, but I'm pretty sure it was junior year. I was third at NCAAs in the 10K. And I think that's the one I'm most proud of. That same year, I was also sixth in cross country, which I was actually a little bit disappointed by. I think if I'd made a move a little bit earlier, anyway, I'm rehashing old stuff, but that third place, it was a pretty tactical race and I had a really good kick. The biggest takeaway for me now is that the person I outkicked was 𝒂𝒓, who is now like one of the best runners in the world. And I think that's the kind of the last time that I was able to say that, because I certainly can't outkick him at all anymore. But at the time I was able to. So I was just really proud of like how I ran that race. I made the right moves. I also doubled the 5K and 10K that year, which was a big deal for me. So that was probably my biggest accomplishment.
So then you graduated with a degree in biomechanical engineering. And what were your initial career plans when you graduated?
I, at that point, knew that I was going to be able to run professionally, and that was something I wanted to do. So I had, again, good times, not great, kind of like high school. So, I wasn't getting recruited by like Bowerman or Oregon Project or anything like that. But like I'd been talking to the Hansons group and I'd been talking to Minnesota Distance Project and ZAP and a couple of the people. And so I figured I would go out and try distance running for a few years, get through, because it was an Olympic year, and maybe go through to the next Olympic cycle. If it's good and I'm having success, the running lifestyle, it can be tiresome and a little bit boring at times, but it's also getting to continue to be able to compete and go after goals. Like that's it's really, really fun. And I wanted to be able to do that, before I settled down to a desk job. I did eventually plan on using my degree someday. So biomechanical engineering, I wanted to go into potentially shoe design or maybe designing prosthetics or something like that. But I was like, I'm going to put that on hold and we're going to go join the Hansons group and see what professional distance running is all about. And it ended up working out pretty well for me until kind of the wheels fell off.
Yeah. How was the recruitment process for professional running different than college? Did you have to, did the professional groups come to you, or were you having to like apply kind of like a job?
For me, Hansons did come talk to me. Minnesota Distance Project did come talk to me, but they certainly weren't battering down my door. I think I was a good fit for the Hansons. They, especially at that time, like to recruit guys that were solid kind of 5K, 10K, but their real strengths lay more towards the marathon, somebody that could come in to develop. And because at that point, I think they were still mostly like D2, D3 guys, or like a D1 person that really never hit it. And so I kind of fit that mold, but I was still, I wasn't quite good enough for the top groups, but I was good for the Hansons. So, I think it's probably going to work differently if you talk to some people who are a little bit better than college than I was, like going back to Chris or my other teammate, Elliot, like they were getting recruited by Bowerman because they had NCAA titles or, second place at NCAA type of things going for them. I didn't have quite those credentials. So it was mostly like I'd really like to run for you. Can I please run for you? And then they're like, yeah, sure. Why not? As opposed to, yes, please let me give you a contract.
And I'm guessing that your first contract was not quite good enough for you to purely focus on running, and you had to get another job, I assume.
Yeah. So the nice thing about the Hansons, and I think one of the reasons that they have the chance to develop so many runners, is they provide a lot of stuff for you. So you get housing when you get there. The contract that they give you is very performance based. So if you come in and you have success, then you can support yourself. So, but they also, because they own running stores, the hours that you work at this running store, you can essentially, you work it completely around training. So there's never any conflict with getting to races, getting time off, any sort of that. So, I moved there early on. Cost of living was relatively cheap, and I was living in the houses for a while. And working at the running stores. But pretty quickly I hit one of those kind of places where the contract kicked in. So actually I was able to do pretty much just training when I was living in Michigan. I did still work at the running stores kind of 3 days a week or something like that, just because I'm a pretty firm believer that you need to have something else besides running going on. If it's all running all the time, it's great when it's going well, but if anything goes wrong, like you get an injury or you're on downtime or for whatever reason, if running's not going well, there's essentially nothing else going on, and it can be pretty tough to kind of stay motivated and keep your spirits up. And that's kind of a perspective that I've only increased my commitment to that perspective since my injury problems and moving out here to Boulder. So yeah, I always kept doing kind of a part-time job on the side, but I was able to make most of my money from running competitively.
Yeah, I'd imagine training in the Hansons group would be pretty intense at times, but also I think it seems like it'd be a lot of fun to train with such elite runners. And then
Yeah,
in 2012, you won the USATF cross country championships. What was it like
club
to
cross-country championships. I'm gonna have
club?
to make that. Yeah, that's kind of the junior nationals of cross-country championships. But yes, I did that.
And well, what was that like to run cross country after high school and college?
Cross country is my first love, so that's one of the biggest. It's not a disappointment or a frustration, but I do wish we had more opportunities to run cross country here. Like you look at what they do in Europe, right? They have like whole cross country racing leagues, and you can join a team, and like that's the biggest thing I miss, and it's the biggest thing I love to get to do as a professional. Just get out in the mud, and you get to finally get that team atmosphere back. Even if it's with your training group. So yeah, even as a professional, I always want to get back to cross country as much as possible. It doesn't matter how much I focus on the marathon or anything else. I'm never going to move entirely away from cross country. And that race, I think clubs has gotten a little bit more competitive since I was doing it, or since that first year that I did it. But it was on this course in Lexington, Kentucky. So it was a nice, real rolling, grassy, it's kind of whipping wind and just a little bit of drizzle, nice muddy course. So it was just my ideal cross country course. So that was a really fun race to run. It's certainly, actually, it's not that different from what you do in high school or college. It's a national championship, so people can go out very hard, and there's like very disparate levels. But that's exactly what you do in cross country, right? Like you show up to the state meet or to the district meet or something like that, and there's going to be some people that are going to go out too hard, and they're going to come back, and then there's the guys that are going to be contenders, and you just have to kind of pick your spot and make sure you follow your race plan. So there's not a huge adjustment to racing at the professional level, and in fact it's just that a nice sense of familiarity, getting back to your roots.
What was the team aspect like for those cross country meets?
That's also one of the reasons that clubs is awesome, is you get to race with a team. And at the Hansons, we had like a really good group of guys. So guys I'm still friends with now, we just like, I think we had 6 people with us at that time. We were able to fill out like a pretty solid crew. And not a lot of people were sending teams to clubs at that point, or they would, but like not quite at the level that Hansons was at. So I think we won pretty handily that year, which is a lot of fun. It's always more fun to celebrate with other people. But yeah, I was really good friends with all the people on that Hansons team. So anytime we had a chance to do any sort of team activity, it was going to be a fun race. Yeah, I don't know. As a professional, like also there's more opportunities when you go to a race for post-race kind of stuff, right? In high school, you're essentially limited by what your coach can take you to. Whereas when you're a professional, like you can drive and you can go into bars and you can like kind of go out on the town and have a little bit more fun. So clubs is also a very fun experience because all the teams are there, and after the race, they're all interested in going to a party. So the club's after party is notorious for being pretty fun, or it can be pretty fun.
So after you ran cross country and track, you moved on to the roads, and in 2014, you ran your first marathon, the Chicago Marathon. and ran 2:13. But shortly after that, you had some Achilles pain, and you got 15th at the 2016 Olympic marathon trials, which is an impressive race considering you were slightly injured. And then later, the Achilles flared up again, and this continued to be like a downward spiral. And could you just describe this rough patch and how it lasted a couple years and how you got back into running?
Yeah, that marathon trials, that was not like my Achilles got good all of a sudden. Like that whole buildup, it was essentially you'd start a run, because for a while there, I could tell the Achilles was getting bad, and I'd have some good days, I'd have some bad days. Maybe it would warm up like 10 to 15 minutes into the run. By the time we got to the buildup for the marathon, there weren't any more good days. It was like my Achilles would hurt from the moment I woke up to the moment I went to bed. Runs, you would think that like I had broken something by the way that I was running. I was compensating so hard. Maybe if I started going fast, I could get blood flowing enough that I could have a somewhat normal stride, but I know I was just messing up my hips all over the place. But it was one of those things where I could technically run on it. It was an Olympic year, so I'm going to train through it. But like training with pain all the time, just every run, you kind of have to like psych yourself up. Like, okay, it's going to hurt, but we're going to get through it. Not just like sort of the pain of getting through a workout, like aerobically, right? Like workouts are always going to hurt, but then you also have this other pain that's kind of unrelated, that's also just kind of in the back of your mind, just kind of chipping away. It just gets exhausting after a while. So yes, I was 15th at the trials, but like, boy, I was never really in it. I tried to hang on to that front pack. It was a 4-lap course. I was on it through 3, but like nothing really happened through 3. So as soon as the race actually started to get competitive, I was off the back. And it was like, I ran it, but I didn't really race it, if that makes any sense. It just, dealing with the Achilles, it just kind of sapped everything, and it just didn't show up quite on form. And then I had a qualifier for outdoors, and so it was the same kind of thing. I'm going to train for track. Achilles still hurt, and the track makes it even worse. So by the time I finished the track trials in 2016, I was fed up. I was ready to be done with running, basically. So I made a deal with myself in, I guess it would have been July of 2016. I'm not going to train for anything until this Achilles is better. And then didn't end up racing for 3 years. So it was one of those things where, I'd go see a doctor. We'd kind of work on some sort of new intervention. It might have been, shockwave or PRP or electroshock or ultrasound or something. And so it would start to feel better because you take time off and you're doing rehab and things calm down. And then as soon as I get to a certain threshold of mileage, it would just flare back up. And I'd be right back where I started. And so, be kind of on this like 6 to 8 month cycle of get better, better, better. Boom, we're going to take more time off. We're going to try something different. And in that time, I decided to leave the Hansons. I moved back to Washington State. And then I had a bunch of other personal stuff. I ended up moving back in with my parents. There was a whole bunch of stuff going on at that time. And, the whole time I'm trying to rehab my Achilles, we eventually got to the point in 2017, we made the decision, didn't get the actual surgery until 2018. So what I had is called a Haglund's deformity, which is essentially you get this chronic inflammation in your heel, and it starts to build up this little bone spur on the back of your heel right behind the Achilles. And so essentially whenever you take a step, the Achilles tendon is just rubbing on this bone. So it didn't matter what we did with the Achilles itself, all these soft tissue interventions, eventually it would start rubbing on that bone and it would just be bad again. And so we eventually made a decision, we're going to have to go in there, we're going to just shave off that kind of little bone spur. So it's the same thing Galen Rupp had. Riley Masters just had surgery for it. It's kind of the de jure injury. But anyway, got surgery on that bone spur in 2018, I think May of 2018. Finally got back to running decent mileage, actually being able to train in, I think, September, October of 2018. It's a little bit fuzzy looking back at my logs. and then just a very, very slow buildup. And I finally ran my first race back almost 4 years to the day after that 10K at the U.S. Olympic trials. And it was like the Cole Elementary 5K. It was just some kind of local race. But yeah, I think it was basically June 2016 to June 2020 was my, or no, 2019. So it must have been 3 years to the day. I don't know. It's really blurry at this point. But yeah, it was 3 or 4 years of no racing, nothing on the schedule, trying to rehab.
So then what would you give, or what would you say to the people that are injured and have been dealing with injuries for a while? What is some advice that you would give?
That's tough because coming back from injuries, it's a grueling process, right? Because you lose all this fitness, and when you start to come back to running, like you feel like absolute garbage, and it takes a long time to feel good again. And rehabbing an injury, it's not fun, right? It's a bunch of extra work, so it has to be worth it to you. But if you've made the decision that like coming back from this injury is worth it, I think the biggest thing is like you just got to keep plugging away at it. Like, through those 3 years, like you just keep coming back, and eventually things will turn around. You kind of have to have faith. So Des Linden, her big quote is keep showing up. And I think that's really applicable to injury rehab. Like it's not going to feel good until it feels good. And the amount of time in that first section there, it can be really, really long. And so putting in the work has to be worth it to you, right? Getting back to training has to be worth it. But if you commit to it, it is going to turn around. It just takes time. And that's a really frustrating answer, that there's essentially nothing you can do other than everything. But that's kind of what it is. But I will say it will get better. You just have to have faith that eventually it's going to turn around.
I think that is something that my dad needs to hear. He's been injured for a while, hasn't been able to run. But once you got your
Actually, the other thing I
surgery,
will say about that though is if the status quo isn't working, you do need to switch it up. I do think I kind of had the mentality that because before my Achilles got really bad, it was one of those things was like, well, it's bad right now, but once I take time off, I'll kind of be able to get it under control, kind of doing the regular things. So for me, that would have been like, getting better with stretching or getting better with foam rolling or something like that. And that's okay for small stuff. But like, once you realize it's a big thing, small stuff's not going to work anymore. So like, if you keep doing the same stuff and you're like, well, I don't want to get surgery or I don't want to go see a PT about this, like, it's not going to get better. Like you need other people's eyes and you need something else. You need to do something different. So I say stick with it, it will get better. But during that whole process, I essentially know every possible treatment you can do on an Achilles because I tried all of them and they didn't work. Like you do have to keep kind of switching things up. So if your dad has been dealing with it for 2 years, keep plugging away at it. But also, if for those 3 years it's just been stretching and rolling and like this one strengthening exercise, it's probably time to see a different PT, try a different intervention, do something different. So yeah, switch it up would be the other example or advice I give.
so when you were getting surgery, did you ever think you'd be running marathons again?
That was the hope. At that point, my main goal was I just want to get out of bed in the morning and have it not hurt. If I can get back to running, that's fantastic. If I can get back to racing, that would be amazing. I was 50% of the way to thinking like, I'm probably not going to be a professional racer again. Like it's probably going to be kind of local races. Maybe I'll get into trail running. Mainly, I just want to be able to run and have it not hurt was my main goal going into surgery. I don't think I really was thinking too far ahead as like, okay, this is what I need to do to make the Olympic trials. Like this equals that thing. At that point, I'd been dealing with kind of setbacks for so long that it was like, let's hope this one works. And it was kind of a throw up my hands. This is the last ditch. If this doesn't work, I'm probably going to retire. I'm not going to run anymore. If it works out, that's great. Yeah, I had kind of things that I wanted to occur, but I don't think I was really like counting on it.
And anyways, enough with the negatives. I don't want to dwell on them, but it is a great story and good to hear other people's perspectives from your experience, and I think everybody can learn from it. You were living in Boulder. You had moved out there to train with Lee Troop, who was a great Australian marathoner, and you finally got to race again in 2019, first race in 3 years. How did it feel just to be racing again? And what was your mindset going into these races?
Initially it was, oh boy, this is gonna hurt, because like, you know, you come back from injury and like everything, nothing feels right. Like especially we did after that first 5K back, which felt great because like, you know, you put the uniform on for the first time, you get kind of like not pre-race jitters, but like, you know, you go through that process again after so long not doing it. That felt great. Then the next one after that was like a 3K on the track, and you don't think of track running as being that different from regular running, but like just putting on spikes or just being in a different rhythm, it's really different. And I had definitely gotten out of that feeling. So that race hurt. And then they decided to throw me into the Boulder 10K, which is a local race here. It's very competitive. It's a pretty hilly course. Like it's hard when you're fit, and I was not fit. So again, it was mostly like just get through this. Like let's hopefully just have like an okay day out. And then I ran, I think it was the 𝒂𝒂𝒍𝒐𝒍𝒆 7-miler in Iowa, and that one actually.
Yeah, I was gonna mention that because I'm from Iowa, so
yeah, I love that course. It's, speaking of tough courses, that thing is a real, you know, kick in the face. But I was top 10, and so I was like, oh, I might actually be competitive. And this was, you know, I traveled for the first time in like 4 years, which was really fun. You know, you start to put a uniform back on and like get back into the rhythm of things. But obviously Chicago was like the kind of, it had been the goal. We knew if I can get back in time, we need to get a qualifier for the trials. That's kind of the goal. Your best opportunity is probably going to be this, or it's going to be CIM, but CIM, you're not going to have time to come back. So Chicago, we try to get a qualifier. Let's hit it. And then by that time, Chicago was the first race in 5-6 years where I got like really nervous before a race. And I think one of the reasons I wasn't quite as consistent in my later years with the Hansons, and one of the reasons I was okay kind of taking time off, is like I wasn't getting nervous anymore. I wasn't like excited to race. Whereas the night before Chicago, like I couldn't sleep. I think I got maybe 2 hours, and it was one of those things, the day before the race, you just get that adrenaline wash. Like it just kind of like flows over you, and everything feels kind of like weak, and you feel a little bit sick in your stomach. And I remember absolutely hating that feeling in middle school. And, you know, even when I got more experience, whenever I get it, I just absolutely hate it. But when it's gone, you don't realize how much that just keys you up and just gets you ready to go. And so I miss that feeling. And stepping onto the start line in Chicago, even though I didn't sleep the night before, like just kind of having that adrenaline, I just knew I was ready. I was keyed up. I was excited to race again. And that's a really, really good feeling. And then the race went really, really well. So it was good.
That might be the first time that I've actually heard anybody say that they were excited to visit Iowa. So you're making us proud. All right, thank you so much for watching all the way through the end. Let me know what you thought of that interview. And I'm gonna start doing a series, I think. I think I might try to get some other runners on the YouTube channel and interview people, have them share their story and inspire me, and more importantly, inspire you guys. So what should this series be called? Let me know below. That is the inquiry of the episode. Thank you so much for watching. Part 2 will be coming later in the week. I hope you enjoyed. Live life to the max, run to the max. I will see you soon. Goodbye.